Hi, this is Tim of the 1916 Company. Welcome and thanks for logging on. If you love this watch, email us tmosso@the1916company.com for pricing. That's tmosso@the1916company.com for pricing. Today, we discuss a 2022 launch from Zenith. This is the Chronomaster Sport Boutique Edition, available exclusively at Zenith's factory stores. So it follows up on the 2021 Chronomaster Sport, which was much talked about because it has some Rolex overtones, at least in its initial version. But having evolved 1 year, the Chronomaster Sport Boutique Edition feels much more like Zenith's own product. And you can see aesthetically, it is quite distinct, as this unique ceramic bezel features sections of 3 separate bezels, cut, faced, and assembled. So you're actually looking at 3 different pieces of ceramic here that mirror the traditional Zenith El Primero triple tone registers. That is why the two things are the way they are. They correspond. 41 millimeters in diameter, in steel with ceramic bezel. The watch is 14 millimeters thickened from lug tip to lug tip. You can see that it is 46.9 millimeters across the wrist, and then if we measure the end lengths of the bracelet, it's 50 millimeters across the wrist with a 20 millimeter spacing between the lugs. When I throw it on my wrist, which is 16 centimeters in circumference, it has an excellent fit. I would say this is superb. Taking a quick look down the barrel, you can see that the lugs themselves, being short across the wrist, they come nowhere near the edge of my wrist, so I think you could wear this on a wrist as small as 15 centimeters circumference, maybe even 14. It's not a thick watch, but it's not a thin watch. Consider it safe for all jacket cuffs and probably most dress sleeves. And then over the top, which always exaggerates the width of a watch, you can see the lugs are still not over the edge of my wrist. This one's exceptionally fresh, so presumably someone bought it, lost his nerve, and sold it before he wore it. Well, yeah, that is the way to get maximum resale value on your watch. It's also a terrible way to enjoy your watch, so for the next owner, lucky you. The bracelet's a 3-link design. You can see with an integrating end link, and then it tapers a little bit as it moves down away from the lugs. There is a polished outer face to each link, as well as a bevel on each side. The secondary links in the middle, they are polished, and then the shoulders, the flanking links, are satinated. You can see removable links here are fixed by screws, so you can size this with a jeweler's screwdriver at home. You can also see that there are several pairs of divots drilled through the clasp, so even after you remove the links, you can use your strap tool to dismount the spring bar and change the anchoring point inside the clasp. Single fold deployant clasp here. We've got a clamshell lock and then sort of a little bit of a curve there so you can more easily dig your nail in. And then Zenith, realizing that over time this component might lose its tight tolerances, so it's fixed here using screws rather than being pressed on. You can also see here we have these little spring-loaded ball-bearing pin snaps for a nice solid and secure action, a really crisp snap, and they really did think ahead, making the clamshell replaceable over time. The case, again, this is very much Zenith's watch. I think the initial versions looked a little bit like a Daytona, just because the color schemes, the bezels, and the dials. The case looks nothing like a cosmograph. You can see it has integrated lugs that come to an angular tip. Their tops are satinated. Their expanding bevels are polished. They have these squared off ends that are polished. And then we've got these pump-style pushers with a little Zenith star on the crown, and then another kerf, this one underneath the crown. You can see it on the case back, so you can dig your nail in more easily. Very functional. The bezels are scratch-resistant ceramic, and I do mean bezels, not bezel, because you can see that these are hard breaks. If you look at something that features a 2-stage colorization or ceramization process, look at like a Pepsi GMT on a Rolex, you'll find there's a little bit of clouding where the two colors transition, whereas here it's razor sharp because rather than one piece that's been colored twice, these are literally 2 different pieces, one in black, one in blue. They've been lapped and faced, and they're perfectly flushed. You can feel a little bit of a seam between them if you run your fingernail over, but it's super subtle and beautifully made, and it does make for those super sharp distinctions between the 2 different colors of the material, this one being chromed and polished. Now, of course, it's not chromed. It looks like chrome. That's the impression you get. But it's deeply impressive and super sharp once again as it breaks. You can see how they even cut through the recess underneath the 10, and that is a sort of, I would call it spherical recess, and it's cut perfectly down the middle and reformed. We've got this nice vaulted crystal over the dial, which has a metallic silver sunburst. Now I'm going to call this a little bit more of a silver with muscle. So this isn't some weak silver. This is Audi Avis silver. This is Mercedes AMG Alubeam silver, but with a metallic sunburst graining. Now you can see that this is a unique bezel. It's not a tachymeter scale, 1/10 of a second. So with Zenith's striking 10th complication, it breaks up each second into 10 fractions of a second. So the El Primero traditionally has been able to resolve 1/10 of a second, but chronograph scales have been so hard to read that it's been difficult to practically take advantage of that potential accuracy. Whereas here, I can easily see that it is 2 seconds and 2/10. Easy to read. And here, I can see that it is 5 seconds and 3/10. Easy to read. And of course, it's visually spectacular. It's a foudroyant that will run down the power reserve, but for the most part, it'll keep going as long as you are wearing the watch. Now we have sunken registers, which you can see overlap a little bit, but unlike previous Zenith overlapping registers, there's no impediment to the reading of these subdials. They feature a little bit of a lip outboard, and then there's a concentric pattern over their scales and centers. So we have our running seconds display over at 9. We have our chrono 60 seconds display over at 3. And then we have a 60-minute chronograph register down at 6. Now we have a feature here that the original El Primero movement did not have, which is hacking seconds. We also have a quick set system for the date, which is quite snappy and crisp. The watch uses a lateral clutch for engagement, which is very traditional El Primero, but it also uses a column wheel for function selection. So as you cycle through the functions, you will find there's your blue column wheel. It is very crisp and positive. Now, other changes between this caliber 3600 and the original El Primero include more power reserve. It's now 60 hours rather than 50, and 35 joules rather than 31. You can see the lateral clutch right here next to the center. And the El Primero has always been a good-looking automatic chronograph. It doesn't hide the mechanism below a winding bridge, so there's a lot to see and appreciate. Though you can't really appreciate it to the max, there is a silicon escapement here, which reduces friction and reduces oscillating mass. It improves the performance in between services and extends the service interval. It also improves timing. Still 36,000 vibrations per hour. It's got a 10 beat per second rate, which is why even when you stop the chronograph, you can see that the constant seconds hand seems a little bit smoother than a conventional 8 beat per second watch. And then all of this water resistant down to 100 meters, so you can really swim with it. You can see a combination of media blast, snailing, satination, polish, and blued screws on this movement. It's a good looking, mostly mechanically finished, but very good looking movement that is assembled and regulated by old school watchmakers. Let's do a quick Lume shot right here so you know what it looks like in the dark one more time. It's got almost a diamond profile. Reach out to Team Mosso at the 1916 Company for purchase and pricing details.